Sorry about that. We are working through some technical difficulties, but we want to welcome you to today's webinar, which is called Ditch the Widgets, Building an AI-Ready RIA on Structured Workflows and Enterprise Data Models. I'm Johnny Swift of Impact Communications, and I'll be your host today for this insightful webinar featuring John O'Connell of the Oasis Group and Conor Curtis of Practifi, where they'll be discussing how structured, consistent workflows create better data, how that data fuels an enterprise model that supports advanced AI use cases, and why widget-based integrations fall short in an AI-first world. So a quick intro to each of our guests. Conor Curtis is the head of product at Practifi, a performance optimization platform purpose-built for the wealth management industry that empowers teams to automate workflows, create rich client records, and access advanced analytics within a unified experience. And John O'Connell is founder and CEO of the Oasis Group, a leading consultancy for the wealth management industry that offers award-winning consulting services, industry-leading research, and compelling on-demand training. So thank you both for joining me today. And one quick note to everyone with us before we jump into the questions and the discussion. We're going to hold all audience questions until the very end of our discussion. But if you have any questions, please, you can submit them in the chat box or the questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel. So with that, I want to jump right into the conversation. And John, the first question's for you. From your perspective, what are you seeing in the market that's driving RIAs to rethink their CRM strategy right now?
So I think, I think a lot of RIAs today are really beginning to look at where is their data living today? And how much do I have access to that data so that I could do interesting things with it, right? So, for example, we've seen this explosion now in prospecting tools, right? And many of those prospecting tools want you to be able to take data out of your CRM, all your prospects, and then feed it into the tool so that they can rate which prospects are most likely to buy from you. So that's one use case that we're seeing. The other use case we're seeing is, a lot of people have an enormous amount of data locked up in the notes that are in their CRM. And they want to be able to access that data in the notes because it's very rich. There's a lot of information in there. For example, you may have where your client went to school, or the fact that they have a dog, or how many children they have. Those are not fields in your CRM because you're not reporting on them, but they're definitely data elements that are locked up in those notes. And it would be incredibly valuable for you to unlock that data in conversations that you had with your client, or to determine the next best action that they may have based on the age of their children, for example. So I think what's happening today is a lot of RIAs are beginning to look at these new tools that are coming to market. They're looking at ways to churn through an enormous amount of data, a lot of which with artificial intelligence, and they're beginning to question, can I really get to my data? And if I can get to it, what can I do with it?
And so this is a really interesting thing, John, because you make a really good point about what's going on in the sector, right? It feels to me like AI has kind of just opened Pandora's box, right? There's been this raft of new tools and new features and new capabilities that have landed in wealth tech, and it's made everyone appreciate, I think, the value of their notes and the value of their less structured data, because a note always felt like something you would have to go and read to get something out of yourself. Suddenly, if you have a note from 3 years ago that tells you the name of your client's dog, you can actually use that in meeting prep and say, oh, hey, how's Bucky doing? And it's such a huge step change. And it's been really interesting to see what that's done in a more holistic sense, right? So suddenly people are thinking, okay, well, this is a new world that I'm in, and how do I optimize the technology that I have to realize the potential of that?
Yeah, I like you said, it's open Pandora's box. I keep getting this idea of Mythbusters, where they've completely blown the box apart, right? It's just exploding at this point with the possibilities that are out there.
Yeah, it does feel a bit like that sometimes. I know what you mean.
Conor, for a growing RIA, what are the first cracks that typically show up when their current CRM system isn't working for their practice anymore?
Yeah, sure. Look, it's a great question, and the answers probably depend on where that RIA is in their trajectory specifically. You know, what's failing at a 3 to 5 seat firm is very different to a 50 seat firm, for instance. But there's a few things you might feel along the way, right? You might find that your meeting prep is taking hours when you really feel like it shouldn't. You know, you spend like 3, 4, 5 hours toggling between systems to prepare for one meeting. It's terrible use of your time, right? You might find that when someone leaves the firm, a lot of the internal knowledge leaves with them. And that happens a lot at smaller firms, because at a lot of smaller firms, really, they don't need this sort of organizational hive mind that exists beyond the people in the room. It's just the people in the room talking to each other, understanding what they're trying to achieve. And that lives in their heads. That actually works really well when you're like a 3 to 5 seat firm. But as soon as one of those people leave, well, that's like a third of that organizational memory gone in an instant, and you didn't write it down, so it is genuinely gone. New hires they take a long time to scale, to really ramp into the role. You might find that there's just shadow systems everywhere. People have, one person's writing a whole bunch of stuff in Notepad, one person's maintaining a bunch of spreadsheets, one person actually uses the systems in the way they were intended, right? There's just, you get this wild variability between people. And so all of those sorts of things are the types of cracks that you see when you find that whatever practice you have in place isn't working. And the shadow systems one is interesting, right? Because if the technology is good, people will use it. So if people are going and finding their own ways of doing things, it's because the technology isn't working for them. And so, you know, to your point about the idea that a current CRM isn't working for your practice, it's a great sign, because if people were happy with it, they'd use it. And if they're finding alternatives, then that's a real problem.
So, John, what changes then when a firm truly commits to workflow discipline?
So it's interesting. I mean, you know, Conor brings up a lot of really good points. It's what you've got to look at is what is not working for you in your current CRM solution, right? And what we find more often than not, certainly with the Oasis group when we're helping people do technology transformations, is it does come down to their workflows. Like Conor made a really great point. People can collect notes in a whole bunch of different places, right? And they can analyze data in a whole bunch of different places. But that's not institutional knowledge, that's individual knowledge. So Sally knows how to do it this way, and if Sally leaves, all that knowledge walks out the door with her, right? And Sally knows how to do it that way because it works for Sally, but it doesn't work that way for Suzanne. So how do you get to a point where you've institutionalized some of these processes and they're repeatable? That's problem number one. And that's where we see a lot of firms kind of leaning in and saying, I need to get better processes. I need something repeatable. I'm not able to grow because I have all of this knowledge in individual people and I can't scale that, you know? So I've got to be able to build a workflow that's going to be able to make it a repeatable process. That's the first thing. The second thing is recognizing that that workflow is actually going to speed up all of your operations, right? Because if it's repeatable, then you can measure it. How long does it take to do this? Well, most of my clients, I can, for example, move money in 4 hours. There's a couple of clients that have been waiting for a move money request for like a day and a half. What's going on, right? So once you've got a workflow, then you can instrument that workflow. You can begin looking at it and saying, what's my elapsed time at this particular step? Why is that step slower than other steps? And it gives you a feedback loop that you can then leverage to begin optimizing it. And that's when you really unlock the power of growth. Nobody wants to write all the workflows down. They're incredibly, you know, tedious to do that. You've got to sit down and interview people and understand, what are you doing? How are you doing it? Why are you doing it this way? Let's look at that against the best practice. Does that make sense? Or is that just the way you've done it before? So there's a lot of self-reflection and questioning that needs to happen when you go to document your workflows. But if you're willing to take that leap, you're going to unlock a huge opportunity to be able to standardize it, institutionalize it, make it repeatable, instrument it, find your bottlenecks, fix those bottlenecks, and over time, you're going to drive an enormous amount of efficiency in your firm, which is just going to give you more time to service clients. So that's the beauty of the workflow, and that's when we find that people truly commit to it, It's because they've recognized that. What I'm doing today is not going to work for me moving forward, and I've got to change it.
It's that classic Jack Welch line, isn't it? You know, like if you can measure it, you can move it, and you can't measure a workflow that isn't repeatable because there's just too many confounders. You don't really know what the culprit might be. So that's where instrumentation becomes super valuable, right? And to your point, you know, like the firms who really understand this are the firms who felt the pain of this. So all of the things we were just talking about in terms of the cracks that you can see as a firm grows and scales, those are the people who tend to be willing to commit to this discipline, because it does take a bit of time up front, you know, to really sit down and say, you know, how do we want these things to be done? How ought they to be done? But you do that because you understand that it's worth it.
You know, and Conor, you bring up a really good point, right? It's that inflection point where you realize I'm not just running like a household business here. I'm running a real business. Real businesses have documented workflows, repeatable processes, you know. So it is that inflection point where you say, I need to move from pockets of excellence to organizational and firm level excellence. And takes a lot of self-reflection to get there.
Totally. And the thing is, you're putting your trust in other people as you grow, right? Like if you're a solo outfit and you're doing everything end to end, you know that you're doing it the best way that you can, or sorry, you believe you're doing things the best way you can. I mean, who knows if you actually are? I don't know. But the thing is, as you grow and as you start having servicing teams and you start outsourcing functions to different people, like you're putting a lot of trust in those people, right? And sometimes you hire amazing people and you actually can just trust them. But over time, as the organization expands and trust is diffused across the organization, suddenly you need a source of truth. You need something that holds everyone accountable to a standard, right? And it reduces variance, it reduces beta, right? You know, we love maximizing alpha, but we also love reducing beta. And that's why processes exist. And it's a really valuable thing once you get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah. Staying on this topic, John, how should firms think about standardization versus flexibility with workflows, you know, for firms that want to maintain their secret sauce while still scaling?
So there's certain workflows that like everyone's going to do, right? Opening an account at a custodian, it's pretty standard. There's not a lot of secret sauce in that one. Moving money, not a lot of secret sauce in that one, right? Creating a financial plan probably has some of your secret sauce in there. So the information that you gather may be different to create a financial plan than the competitor down the street, if you will. So what you need to do is you need to look at what portions of my work are easily standardized using workflows. That's low-hanging fruit. So that's what you want to target first. The more complex portions of your workflow are going to be harder, number one, from a change management perspective, to get people on board with standardizing. And number two, it's harder for you to kind of quantify it and make sure that you're gathering everything. I'll give you a very concrete example. If you're a firm that is financial planning first, and you capture a lot of information, for example, about tax planning, because you also offer tax planning, you're probably going to capture a lot more information in your discovery process than a neighboring competitor will. So that's part of your secret sauce, because you're going to use that information to put together a proposal that you believe is going to differentiate you from the firm down the street. That is probably not the first workflow that I would target when working with you. We would target things like, okay, now that they say, I love you and I want to work with you, let's open the account. That's a pretty standard workflow. I want to be able to move money. I want to do my RMDs, very standardized workflows. If you're new to the workflow process, grab those low-hanging fruit first. Get your feet wet. Get to understand, what is it like to document these? How do I handle change management with my team? And say, here's how this is going to work moving forward. You're going to follow this workflow. We're going to measure it. We're going to implement it. We're going to know where bottlenecks are to fix them. Coming up with that is very critical to get everybody on board. So target some low-hanging workflows first, tackle the more complex workflows second, and then when you do, understand where your secret sauce really is and where it's not. For example, in the example I gave you a moment ago, you're going to grab more information in your discovery process. That doesn't mean you can't have a discovery form. It doesn't mean that the data you capture in that discovery form cannot be put as a structured note in your CRM. so that you can interrogate that note later. It's better than a big blob of text. So you may have a secret sauce in what you're capturing in your discovery process, and yet still be able to put that in a standardized form, capture that as a standardized note, and leverage that within your CRM. Again, more complex, a little more thought around that. So if you're new to workflows, grab those early ones first, tackle the complex ones, but have an open mind. You can standardize a lot of what you're doing, even if you're capturing secret sauce types of items.
And I think another thing that comes to mind when I hear the term secret sauce, aside from like burgers, but the other thing that comes to mind is that a lot of that is what goes on in the room between the client and the advisor. It's the conversation itself. It's how you make the client feel, right? And so the process around, say, like a quarterly review or an annual review, whatever you do, right, is pretty standard. Like, we see a lot of workflows in Practifi, and firms can get very opinionated about these workflows. But at the end of the day, if you zoom out, they have way more in common than they don't. What you can't put into a workflow is the conversation itself. That's not something that you can make standardized, and you also shouldn't, right? That is the secret sauce in so many ways. If a client wants to be with you, it's because they like you and they think that you're worth trusting with their money. And it's a big investment on their part, right? Like, they're putting a lot of faith in you. And that's something that a process can allow you to focus on. You're not thinking about all the work going on around the conversation. You're thinking about having a great conversation, and that allows the secret sauce to really shine through.
Yep.
So Conor, many CRMs showcase long integration lists. What's the difference between a widget or iframe integration and true data level connectivity?
Sure. I mean, like, there's like the boring technical answer, right? Which is, I mean, you've basically given it, right? Which is that, like, you can integrate in two fundamental ways. One is you can have a window into the other system, which is what a widget is. Or you can genuinely land the data in the other system, and so it enters the database. It goes into the rows and the columns, right? And up until now, there's been plenty of use cases where widgets have been perfectly fine. The best example I can think of is document management, right? So if you have your document stored in like a SharePoint or a box or what have you, right? You want to be able to access those from the CRM, and doing that through a widget is fine because a human is there looking at the widget and saying, oh, well, these are the files and I want to look at this one, and great, like, it's all connected and it's great. In the new world, that doesn't really work anymore because the AI can't use a widget. It can't access that data directly. It can't see through the window. It's opaque to the AI. So suddenly the need for genuine data connectivity between systems has absolutely skyrocketed to unlock the potential of these use cases that we're seeing in front of us.
So we're talking about structured workflows, solid data model. John, how do these things change the quality of AI outputs for things like meeting prep, note summarization?
So when you think of artificial intelligence, it's kind of a rocket, and the fuel that powers that rocket is going to be your data. So a rocket's going to get you someplace very fast. If you've got good data, it's going to get you to a great place super fast. If you've got really bad data, you're going to run into a wall super fast. So you've got to make sure that you're paying attention to the data you're capturing, and that there's it doesn't have to be completely structured because AI gets around that, right? But it certainly needs to be consistent. It needs to be valid. It needs to be correct. To make sure that AI can use that data to infer other things about your client or to answer specific questions about your client. You may not want to infer anything in the beginning. You may just want to answer factual questions, right? So if your data is inconsistent or it's poorly maintained, it's going to make it very difficult for you to implement a real solid AI architecture on top of that. I'll give you a solid example. Let's say that for when you've got a variety of financial advisors that are talking to clients, and some advisors capture a goal-based planning really, really well, right? Beyond just retirement. They're talking to them about a boat or a new car or an art collection or, you know, a new house. So that's their approach. That's their secret sauce. They're capturing that data. You may have other advisors in your practice that are primarily talking about the investments. What's the returns that the client is expecting? How do they want their values to reflect their money? Do they want an SMA account structure or a UMA account structure? And they may be paying very little attention to goals. So now what you've got is you've got two very different data sets sitting in the same CRM. So if you were to ask across your entire CRM, what goals do I plan the most? You're going to find a very inconsistent result, right? And the reason you're going to find an inconsistent result is in artificial intelligence, you've created a bias in your data set. Part of your data set has a lot of goals, part of your data set never captured them. So what your answer, what goals do I plan the most as part of my practice, is going to be very skewed to the advisor who talks about goal-based planning. You've created an AI bias. So when you're thinking of your data, you've got to think of your data as that fuel that's going to power your rocket. If you put really good fuel into it, you're being consistent in what you capture, regardless of whether the advisor cares about goal-based planning or not. If you're being consistent about what you capture, and if you understand what your data has, then you can implement some very interesting artificial intelligence on top of that. In the example I gave you a moment ago, asking the question, what goals do I plan the most? If you understand your data, you're going to understand that that's actually not a great question to ask it, because it's going to become very inconsistent. So what I find more often than not is a lot of the firms that we work with and a lot of the firms that I speak with in the industry know that they have to clean up their data, but they don't know what to clean up. And when you start putting it in those kind of contexts, I think it becomes much more palatable. It becomes much more understandable. When you say your data is dirty, you got to clean it. What do you mean by that? And when you put some real examples on top of that, I think it does help to illustrate this is what dirty data means, and this is the implication you're going to have. Dirty data is not, I have a phone number for Conor and I don't have a phone number for John. That's not. That's just a data element you got to capture at some point. That's not dirty data. That's missing data. It's the underlying layer that you've really got to dig into to understand where your data sits.
And the thing about it as well, right, is that so many of these AI use cases that we think of actually need some sort of grounded truth in order to function effectively. Like the one I've been thinking about a lot recently is compliance. Like, so an example that I've got in my head is that if we think about analyzing a meeting transcript to flag any potential compliance risks, right? And one of the things that you might want to flag is that there were some investment recommendations made that run afoul of the risk tolerance of the client, right? So what is that risk tolerance? Well, you could infer it from a bunch of notes assembled over the years, or you could have a field in a structured object in your data model that has a set of 4 to 5 different values, each of which clearly means something. And you can assess the transcript against those standards, right? So you need the standards, right? If you don't have those standards, then the entire process of reviewing this from a compliance perspective is entirely inferential, and the bow you're drawing is too long, right? So there are just so many situations like that where if you tried to do it without the structure, you would end up making way too many guesses, or the model would actually end up making way too many guesses. And large language models are great at a ton of things. This is not one of them. The last mile of human capability is primarily in the domain of judgment and taste, right? And these are judgment calls. And if you have that ground truth in your data model, then it becomes very easy because it's just, you're running an assessment rubric, you know, you can do that. But if you're asking it to actually decide what does a balanced risk profile mean and does this represent that, you're going to come unstuck.
I completely agree. I mean, I think what a lot of people look at artificial intelligence like it's magic, right? It's really probabilistic mathematics. So it takes what you've given it and it runs a probability that this is the next thing. So if you haven't given it, in your example, a really good grounding of this is what risk means and here's what levels of risk, here's how you measure levels of risk, it's 100% going to run a probability based on everything else that it may know to come up with the vision of risk, which could be completely incorrect. And that's why, like, when we talk with people about AI, we say to them, you have to have a human in the loop, specifically for what Conor was mentioning a moment ago, right? It's that the human in the loop is the one that sits there and says, does this make sense to me? Is this what I want to convey to a client, right? So it really comes, like you said a moment ago, to the results and the taste, so to speak. Is this really correct? And is this really what I want to say to the client? Is critical. But when you're taking a look at the AI models, they are really, really good at running probabilities. But without a lot of data, think of it like a big curve, right? Without a lot of data points, you're going to have something jagged. And that's the same thing with the mathematics that are behind a large language model.
The funny thing about it, like you're right that people think that it's magic. The challenging thing is that in a lot of ways it really is, you know, like it feels that way. Like people aren't kidding themselves. It's just that what we're realizing is how much of the day-to-day work that we've historically done can be done in this entirely different way, where it's just, let's predict the word that comes next. And now it turns out that gets you really far, like surprisingly far, I think. But you've got to understand like where that ends and
Yes.
the human element begins. And the more cognizant you are of that, then the easier it is to figure out, well, this is how far I can go without applying artificial intelligence to my job, but this is where I come in.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like you guys just touched on this, but I want to dig a little bit deeper, Conor. Where do you see firms overestimating what AI can do for them? And on the flip side, where are they potentially underestimating AI's potential?
You're right. You're right. We touched on this a little bit just now, right? But I think like collectively we've started to move past the concerns around AI replacing the advisor. I think that was a big thing that people were talking about last year, but I think people are starting to understand what we're talking about now, which is there is a point where artificial intelligence ends and the human element begins. And that is a very challenging problem to solve technologically. But also, people don't want to deal with machines all day. Like I know for my part, like, so I've worked remote for about 5 years now, right? And I miss being in an office, I gotta say. Sometimes it's nice having a short commute, don't get me wrong. That's really nice, it's convenient. But it is really nice being surrounded by people and exchanging ideas. And it fills your cup, you know? And people who are looking for a financial advisor are doing this not because they want someone to maximize their return on investment necessarily. Yes, they want to make money, but they want someone they can trust to help them navigate life, right? We're increasingly seeing financial advisors become like a pseudo life coach for people, right? The amount of information that gets shared behind closed doors is just is crazy. And that is the place where I think there was a time where people were thinking, oh, AI might start to make its way in here. And you know, for the upcoming generation who spend their entire day doom scrolling, maybe it will. They've already got an AI girlfriend. Why not have an AI advisor? But for most of us, we still really want the person to be the person who we are placing our faith in, our trust in, and saying, here is everything I have. I trust you with this. Please don't make me regret that. And then let's go on this roller coaster together. And then I think beyond that as well, some people think that AI might be able to magically fix bad data. Like I've heard that come up quite a bit as well. And sometimes it can, but a lot of the time it can't. And really at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to be so confident in it that it avoids you looking at the data yourself. At which point it doesn't save you a lot of time, right? Everyone wants a panacea for bad data, right? Because it's a bit of a grind to sort it out. And AI can help, don't get me wrong, it can be valuable, but you're not waving a magic wand. You will still want to go in there and make sure that what you've got is what you want.
Yeah, I think you made so many good points there. I agree that I think the conversation around AI replacing an advisor, I hope, is behind us. I think that what we will be seeing is cybernetic advisors that are part AI and technology and the human element. because I do think that there is a cliff, a point, a jumping off point where AI will get you so far, technology will get you so far, and then beyond that, you need that human element. So I do think that we're going to see more cybernetic advisors in 2026 and 2027, certainly. The second
how do we the term cybernetic there? Like, what are you thinking when you say that one?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is I'm going to date myself with the movie RoboCop, but here's someone who is trained to do a very specific job and still has a human element associated with them to make judgment calls. And I think that as prescient as that movie was, and I know that's probably before your time too, but as prescient as that movie was, I think it did explore a lot of what we're seeing today, right? I mean, we're not seeing it necessarily with robots yet, and I do underscore yet with capital letters, italics, and everything else, but we are seeing people wrestle with that existential view of the world of, will this replace me? And the reality of it is, it shouldn't, and it won't. And I think that we're finding a lot of fear and uncertainty around that at the moment, but I don't think it will replace the human advisor, and I don't think it will replace professional services firms. I think it will enable them to do more things at scale and have more facts at their fingertips, and it will enhance their capabilities, but it can't replace them. No one is going to sit across, there's no AI that's going to sit across the table for you when you say, unfortunately, my spouse has been diagnosed with cancer, and do anything except just go, well, let me run a Monte Carlo simulation about that. That's not what you want to hear. And that, unfortunately, is precisely what AI is going to do for you. So I do think that there is a huge place for human advisors. I think that the cyborg advisor is a combination of using technology to get to facts faster, to do things faster, to come to decisions faster, but then ultimately the right or wrong of that decision has to be a person.
I think that, like, on the underestimating side as well, because, you know, we're talking all about overestimates here, but like there is some interesting stuff on the underestimating side, and I think that people are still currently underestimating just how much you can get done if you set yourself up the right way. And we're really close to this at Practifi, right? Because software engineering is way out in front, because all of the people making AI are software engineers, right? So they're making tools for themselves as much as anyone else. And so now, like, our developers at Practifi have their own teams of AI agents. That's how it's set up now. So my engineer has an engineer agent, an architect, a tester, a user experience designer. Like, they have this team of agents, and they now spend a lot of their day coordinating that team. And watching the team coordinate each other as well, which is super interesting to watch them just actually have conversations with each other and go back and forth as they're building stuff. But the nature of work has changed a lot. I think people are missing that because with all of these tasks now being effectively outsourced to your own personal workforce, your role in the middle is fundamentally different. And I think people don't know what that feels like yet. I know a little bit of this because I'm kind of working this way myself these days. And what I find myself doing, right? So, I mean, I have voice to text on my computer, so I don't type anymore because I mean, no one likes typing, and now you don't have to because voice to text is that good these days, right? Download Whisperflow if you haven't, it's amazing. But I spend my entire day in constant dialogue with 3 different agents, building different documentation for my engineering team to go and develop features. And so I will spend the whole day switching back and forth between 3 active conversations. And I will, and I just walk around this room. You might have noticed I'm moving around a little bit here because I don't have a seat anymore because I just walk around the room all day talking. I don't have to be chained to my desk anymore, right? And it's a lot of fun. Like, it's because having this sparring partner, this thinking partner on tap, on demand, who, if you guide them, they're genuinely really good, right? Then you're having these really insightful and vivifying conversations, right? But you're switching between 3 of them all day, and it's, you know, 111, 111. You're just constantly switching between all of them, and by the end of the day, my brain is a puddle And this is true for pretty much anyone who's working in this way right now, but we all can't stop because it's so much fun. So it's a crazy time to be in knowledge work. But in a lot of ways, I think it's a good thing, right? Because it's giving us access to something that I think a lot of us were missing, right? Is someone to talk to. And if you set yourself up in the right way and give them all of the context they need to do that effectively, you have great chats all day, every day. And it just ends up being a really enjoyable way to spend your time.
I have to admit, I completely agree with you. I mean, we've got a set of agents that I've built and I use to ideate on article ideas, to talk about specific client engagements that we're working on and gnarly problems that I'm trying to solve. And it is invigorating to have a conversation with artificial intelligence and have it come back with different ideas or different ways to approach a problem, which are really insightful a lot of times. In fact, sometimes frighteningly insightful, right? Yeah. You're like, wow, I really wish I thought of that.
Yeah.
And it's real, they're really quite good. And they're learning your style as they go, right? So they're going to become more and more, like I've got one that's just a contrarian agent. It just disagrees with me. Everything that I do, it just disagrees with, which is fantastic because it forces me to think about different angles for the problem that I'm trying to solve because it's just contrarian. And I think that people really are underestimating that right now. Most of the conversations that I have with financial advisors are, how do I clean my data? AI will help you to identify the problems with your data, but it's not going to magically solve those. How do I get a workflow done better? How do I have AI do a specific task? And those are great conversations to initially have, right? You should be thinking about what tasks can I give to artificial intelligence that it may be very good at, and I can now take that off my team member. But I think for folks like you and I that are in this space, we're kind of way beyond that now. And now we're leveraging agents to say, okay, well, these tasks, I've got people that are doing those tasks. And now I've got other agents that are helping me to really drive the business and drive forward in ways that, quite frankly, just weren't necessarily possible. And I find certainly with me as the CEO of a firm, a lot of times you want to talk about things that are going to affect the direction of the firm, and you can't really talk to some of the people in the firm about them because you're changing the direction of the firm. So the ability to have those conversations in a safe space and really ideate and come up with different approaches to problems, I think is incredibly valuable. And right now, there are very few people that I talk to that understand that application yet. I think we'll get there, but right now, if you're not on the cutting edge, it's a little bit far-fetched. But there are people they're doing it right now.
Pretty close to this, right? Because we're looking at rolling this out across Practifi, right, and getting people to work differently. And when John was saying before everyone that AI is learning, don't get terrified by that, because what we mean by learning is we mean reading a document, right? The way that all of this works in the background is just that AI can read files that tell it what to do and tell it all of this stuff that it knows about you. That's memory is a file, right? And so what I would actually recommend to people just as an actionable thing is try out Claude Cowork. So that's launched very recently from the Anthropic team, and it can access files on your computer. It can create files on your computer. So you can work with Claude in Cowork, and you can ask it to write information to files as you go about what you've been doing. And then every time you start a new chat, Claude will just go and read all the stuff that you've been doing, and it'll know where you're up to, it'll know where you're at, and you won't have to explain everything again. And that's where it starts. That's where the value starts to kick in. And eventually, as you kind of lean into this way of working, you see how far you can take it. But yeah, it used to feel far off. It used to require a lot of setup. But what we're going to see over 26 is that these things will become way more turnkey.
Yeah, to your point, I mean, if you look at what we were doing in 25, it was you were creating these agents with specific files that would tell how the agent was supposed to behave, right? Now with things like Claude Cowork, your agent can iterate. For example, you could say to Claude Cowork, no, I disagree with that particular approach. Can you do me a favor and update this file that updates that agent's behavior, and Claude Cowork can update that file. So when I say it's learning, it's still doing what you're telling it to do, right? The files that you give it are instructions, and it's going to follow those instructions in its thought pattern, in its logic, and in those inferences, those predictions that it's trying to make. So it is still at your command. It's not thinking on its own. It's still listening to you and doing what you're telling it to do.
Now, Johnny, we've gone way off track here, dude. I'm sorry, but this is a fun topic of conversation, you know?
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic. So I know you guys could go on for hours, but I'm going to bring us into the home stretch here with a couple of our last questions here. And Conor, another one for you. What do you think is going to distinguish the firms that successfully turn their CRM into a true operating system from those that just treat it as a glorified Rolodex?
So it's funny you asked that, because a lot of what we just talked about plays into this exact question, actually, because it comes down to a willingness to change. And what I think we're going to see, certainly we're seeing it in software, right? And I expect it to be broadly applicable across all types of knowledge work, is that incumbents will thrive if they are willing to change, because the nature of our work is fundamentally changing. And a lot of that has to start with leadership, right? You can't credibly guide an organization through a change process if you yourself do not change. So I think that for a lot of us ourselves, we need to look at how we work, and we need to understand the impacts that this technology has on us, so we can be evangelists for it within our organizations. So I think that's one thing that will be a genuinely massive differentiator between firms in terms of the value that they get out of their technology, such as their CRM. And I think that it's also how you conceptualize your data at the end of the day. It's mindset. It's, do you see it as a burden, or do you see it as a strategic asset for the business? And so often, historically, firms have seen data as a burden. They've seen it as a necessary evil. And to be fair to them, like, I don't think that that was necessarily an incorrect position to take 5 years ago, right? I think a lot of the time it did feel that way for good reason, but now we need to change our mindset about how we approach data and what it can unlock for our business. Because the firms who do that are the firms who are really going to stand apart from everyone else and are really going to execute so much better that execution becomes how they win, as opposed to all the other things that can set you apart and differentiate you in the market. You don't want to be left behind in that transition. It's going to be a big part of what moves over the next few years.
And we're coming up to my last question here. So audience, if you have any questions, please submit those now, and we'll tackle those in a few minutes here. But John, as you look 3 to 5 years out, and we touched a little bit on what we consider coming this year, but looking a little bit further down the road, how do you see the relationship evolving between workflows, data, AI, all within the RIA tech stack?
I think you're going to find that artificial intelligence is going to become, just a central part of every portion of the RIA tech stack in the next 2 to 3 years. There are a lot of firms that are working on this right now. I would say in the next year to 2 years, they're going to roll out in the next year, you're going to see everyone roll out their initial forays into artificial intelligence. So 26 will be the initial rollouts. 27 is where you're really going to get to a point where it's everywhere within your RIA tech stack. So if you're a firm today, what you really need to be asking, like, let's say you're a firm right now and you're about to renew a contract with any vendor in the wealth tech space. The first thing you should be asking that vendor is, how is your data organized today? Is it a single data model? Are they disparate data models? Do you have, how is your data structured today? Because that's the foundation that you want to understand before you enter your next 3-year, 5-year agreement. If their data is not structured very well today, do not enter a 3-year agreement with them, because the technical debt that they're going to need to clean up to enable artificial intelligence on top of that is so great that you will be trying to break that contract at some point. So I think that in the next 3 to 5 years, AI will be everywhere. There's going to be winners and losers in that game. The winners are going to be people who have a structured data model and who have an ability to help you keep data clean. And there will be the software firms that win. The software firms that lose are going to be people who have legacy data models, really high technical debt, and are going to struggle to leverage artificial intelligence at the top, at the core. You're going to see, by the way, a lot of Band-Aid work in 26 and 27 around bad data with AI on top of it to make it all look good. Be a smarter buyer than that. Ask your vendor, tell me what your data looks like, and let's build it from the ground up. What's your data look like? The flashy front end, like Conor knows at this point, you can code something so fast for the front end. If you've got a bad foundation, I could put as many layers on top of your Winchester house and it's going to fall apart.
This question actually came in right before you started addressing this, John, but they asked if we're evaluating CRMs today, what are the top questions we should ask vendors? So we're running out of time here, so maybe we'll limit to top 1 or 2 questions from each of you that they should be asking vendors.
Conor, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think one of the things you should ask are, what are your APIs? How can I get data in and out of this system through them? And it's not often a question that buyers have thought to ask, but suddenly in a world where you yourselves are considering either building your own agents or leveraging, say, just ChatGPT or Claude and model context protocol through them to connect to systems, this stuff really matters. It really matters, right? And so understanding the data connectivity, either the current state or what's planned on the roadmap for them, it's really important because it tells you exactly how well that system is going to integrate into your AI strategy going forward. And then, back to what we were talking about before in terms of integrations, like how do you integrate? A lot of CRM vendors out there we all have a lot of integrations, right? It's a big part of what we need to do to be successful CRM vendors. But like we were saying before, up until now, it was very easy to spruik an integration that was a widget. It was an iframe, it was whatever you want to call it, right? And that was actually, it was fine. It was perfectly serviceable for what it needed to do. But what it needs to do now is different. So you shouldn't just look at the logos on the integrations page and assume you're going to get what you want. Just go a bit deeper than that and try and understand exactly the nature of what those integrations are.
I concur with Conor. I think a lot of folks today see the logo and they think it's integrated. Unfortunately, I think a lot of RIAs have been burned by that, thinking that we're going to get great integration and finding out it was like a single sign-on or something that really wasn't moving data at all. So use that intelligence moving forward. And if you're going to be selecting any new software, whether that's a CRM or anything.
Last audience question we have here before we're going to wrap up today, but what are some early warning signs that our current data structure will not support our future needs?
So one that comes to mind for me would be that let's say you've got a new hire in the business and they're asking someone in the team, where do I find this piece of information, or how does this work? And the answer is go ask Sarah. Well, that's telling me that Sarah had to spend a whole lot of time sifting through nonsense to figure out exactly how things work, and that information lives up here right now. And if that has to happen, then you got a problem. I think as there's doubt, that's one manifestation of like a broader malaise that is affecting the data structure, and there's others out there too. For instance, when you do compliance reviews, they're taking forever, right? Like you can't do any of it based on pre-calculated logic. You've got to go and manually sift through the data every time to form a picture of things. Every time you're trying to answer a basic question, you're exporting a CSV, you're putting it in Excel, you're running queries. Like if you find yourself doing any of these sorts of things, you're clearly in trouble.
Yeah, and I think that a big warning sign is take a look at how much of your data is actually populated, right? If you've got big pockets of data that is not populated, or you've got a ton of custom fields that you're not using anymore, or you've got a ton of custom fields that you've repurposed, so it used to mean this and now it means this, you've got bad data, okay? And what I would recommend at that point is talk to your technology vendor and say, I'd like to export my entire database, and I'd like to throw that into artificial intelligence and have AI go look through the tables. It will read a database super easy. It understands foreign key relationships, primary key relationships, and a whole bunch of things that you're not going to understand necessarily as a consumer of data, but it will be able to draw that together, and it'll do a fairly good analysis of whether or not you've got gaps in the data, how dense it is, how bad it is. That isn't going to fix your data, but it's going to give you an idea of where you want to focus to fix it first. Most firms that we talk to don't even know where to start on cleaning up their data. So what we would normally recommend is get a copy of it, run some basic analysis around the data density, custom fields, things like that. And that will at least give you a starting point of where do you want to start to clean up your data. And start small. Don't think that you're going to fix everything in 3 months or even 6 months. Start small, get some quick wins around some really good data elements, and then build from there. It took you years to get in this position. It's going to take you a while to fix it.
And I think that just like a parting comment on this, right, because we're at time, but it also just kind of neatly encapsulates exactly what we've been talking about here over the preceding hour, which is that AI is going to do a great job of the sort of broad assessment that you're talking about here, John. But fundamentally, that's not you. You don't need that to be 100% correct. You need it to give you a direction, right? You need it to give you something to start with. If you were asking AI to actually transform the data for you, that needs to be perfect, right? That can't go wrong. The consequences of that going wrong are too significant. And that's the part where it actually breaks down, is trying to do things in predictable, reliable ways. And so that's where structure and the need for precision that traditional software has always provided still is exactly what you're looking for there. You need to make sure that the data goes from A to B, and that needs to happen every single time. And the only way to do that reliably and also cheaply, because none of this stuff with AI is actually that cheap at the end of the day, is to do it in the typical way, the old-fashioned way, I guess you could say. But you know, these things are still super valuable as well, and we're all trying to figure out exactly how to use both different strategies to achieve our goals.
Yeah. Well, guys, really in-depth and insightful conversation today. Before we sign off, we just want to let our listeners know a little bit more about where they can find information on each of your firms. So, Conor, you want to go first?
Ours is easy. It's practifi.com.
Perfect.
And you can find me on LinkedIn as well. I often, post bits and pieces, and I talk way more than I should. So if you want to connect there and keep chatting, happy to do that too.
And John, you put out a ton of research and content on these topics. You just released a new white paper on CRM selection and wealth management. So where can people find that white paper and other content?
You can find it on our website, which is www.theoasisgrp.com. Also, you can find it on LinkedIn. Everything that we write and get published winds up getting posted on LinkedIn. So you can look at my page or the Oasis Group page on LinkedIn, and you can find pretty much everything that we do.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today, and we will talk to you next time.
Excellent. Thanks.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.